mamas, and welcome back to the Mamas Who Brunch. I am Julian, your host, and today we have a very special guest, Vaid. She is a speech language pathologist, and she has her own company, Nurturing Babbles. She's a feeding specialist. She provides in-person lactation, feeding, and myofunctional support for families that want to care for their babies. So whether it's like breastfeeding, bottle feeding, starting solids, or concerns with like oral motor development. That's what she specializes in. So I saw your Instagram and I'm so excited because I would love to have somebody that is a professional to come on the podcast to talk about this, because I think this is something that every mom stresses out about, whether it's one or many of these categories. So thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Thank you so much for reaching out, and I'm so happy we were able to connect. Yeah, so my name's Vaid. I'm a speech language pathologist. I might have a little visitor here as we see, that's mom life. Juggling a professional life and mom life has been such a blessing to me. But back to my specialty and the services I provide. As a speech language pathologist, we deep dive into oral motor, swallowing, and feeding disorders. And throughout that journey, after becoming a mom, I noticed kind of a gap in care and lactation. So I went ahead and pursued that certification as well, and been providing in-home services to families in the St. Louis area regarding feeding and swallowing, primarily breastfeeding, bottle feeding, starting solids, or any feeding difficulties that come up. We kind of navigate that together. So,
and you have two boys.
I do.
Hi, buddy. So that was one thing I noticed, and I know you're a contributor for St. Louis Mom. I saw as well. How are you from St. Louis?
I'm not originally from St. Louis. I'm from Southern Missouri, but my husband's family's from here, so we kind of relocated to this area.
So I saw on the website that you started doing this after your son was born. Was there something that inspired you to start this business after you became a mom?
Yeah. So I think as just a first-time mom, even as a professional that's kind of in the medical setting, I was still very shocked on this is definitely a skill that no one can prepare you for. Even though we have grandmothers and sisters and moms that kind of guide us through this journey, it's really one of those things you have to deep dive and get hands-on being a mom. After having my first son, I was like, this is a lot harder and not as intuitive as I initially thought. My first son was born during COVID, and just kind of the situation and the circumstances, I didn't really have any resources to reach out to. No one was providing in-home services for feeding and lactation. And so I felt really alone in that, trying to navigate how am I going to feed my baby, and I'm having feeding challenges, and no one will see me due to, situational circumstances. And so after having my second son, having the support is a game changer, and having someone come into your home with your own environment and your own tools definitely sets you up for better success versus going to a clinic that you may not be able to replicate in your own home.
Yes. And I think having a baby as a new mom, just leaving the house is like a task, right? And it's overwhelming. It took me time and energy just to get out. So it's nice that you go in and see people.
And even if you're feeding well, you still have to prepare around feeding times when you go out and things like that. So when you come into the home, it's such a relaxed environment that you can provide for moms, especially when they're feeling vulnerable and baby may not be feeding as well as they anticipated.
Yeah. And I think as a new mom, that was one of the things that was my number one focus, was to make sure my baby was eating. So it's kind of I don't want to say it. It is a fear. I think just not knowing if your baby's eating enough, or if they're eating well, or if they're eating what they should. So let's say somebody is they just had their first baby. What are some of the signs that you feel would prove or show that they may need some additional support?
Yeah. So as professionals, we definitely lean in a lot on weight as well, but really we look at what the whole body's doing. So is baby having a good enough output, like urine and stool? Are they starting to go back to birth weight? Are they demonstrating some fullness cues after they're fed? Is mom feeling her breasts are starting to soften if she's nursing that breast? Kind of what are the behaviors around baby? Are they spitting up a lot? Do they seem satisfied? Are they having where they're uncomfortable or have reflex? So really we lean in on kind of both of the dynamic is how is mom feeling? And then also what are some of those clinical factors that baby's doing as well, in addition to gaining weight?
So, do you feel like you have more success with moms that come to you before they have a baby or after?
Yeah. So like I was kind of referring back to, like, we can prepare, but really doing the task is what's really going to kind of help us get a feel of how we're doing and where we might need the support. I do offer a lot of prenatal education because I think when moms are struggling, if we can go back to what we know to be true based off those, I always call these are my home base. So if you're having feeding trouble, what do we know to be true? And what can we kind of start to regulate our body and baby's body so then we can reattempt to feed?
Yeah.
And we teach a lot of that in the prenatal education. What are some things that we can troubleshoot if we're having a difficult moment? It might not relieve the overall feeding challenge, but can we get to a place where, maybe we can lower the anxiety, or we can, have that balance back and forth where baby and mom are both relaxed and we can kind of work, because it is a learned skill, like I had said before.
Yes, it is. As a new parent, my daughter is 19 months, but I had no idea. Like, I just thought she was gonna, like, I have heard, like, they have trouble latching. They don't get a, the first time. I didn't believe that. I just was like, oh no, my baby's gonna latch. And I struggled like breastfeeding. I struggled producing. So that was tough. Is there something that you help with new moms to help them produce more milk as well?
Yes. So when I try to get into the home, I try to get in the home as soon as possible, as usually after that first pediatrician appointment. And we do a whole exam. We do a whole feeding exam. So we get baby on the scale, look at their weight. We kind of see how mom and baby have been feeding. We provide techniques and support to kind of help optimize that relationship. And then after the feeding's over, we look at the weight and see how much milk is transferred. If there's any concern with milk supply, then we kind of talk about problem solving through that. And then I'll take a look in baby's mouth and make sure we're, all the oral anatomy is working the way it should. That is a big factor in, is baby able to do the things they need to do with the anatomy or the function that they have.
Yes. I wish I had known this information before I had a daughter, because after I had her, I had the little pump machine. I didn't know how to use it. It was painful. I didn't have the right
Mhm.
parts, like the right sizes. And I just think having somebody to support would have been so nice. So I just see how much of a need this is for new moms and the stress of it. I'm looking at your services online. I feel like it's very affordable for a new mom to have that peace of mind and just get that education from the very beginning. The struggle is not worth it. So I just think this is something that I feel like every new mom needs. And for a second baby, I didn't really learn much the first time because I kind of gave up on the
Mhm.
breastfeeding journey.
Mhm.
I ended up back in the hospital because I had an infected C-section, and I like just stopped. It's such a challenge to keep it going. So having the support from you would be huge for any new mom.
And I
Uh,
often get, like, this is my ninth baby and this baby is different. So I, I think every journey is unique, regardless if you are a first time mom or this is your like 10th child. Just having that support, because really, like I said, we don't know how it's going to play out until we actually do that and see how baby's
yeah.
doing as well.
What are some of the biggest myths around breastfeeding?
Yeah. Just from even my own experience, that this is it's natural to breastfeed, but it's not a natural skill that we tend to have. So just learning that, it's okay to ask for help and support. So some of the myths that I guess I often see or debunk is that breastfeeding is super easy and you should be intuitive. It should come right out and they should be able to latch. Often that's not the case. And so when we already have this kind of expectation or false reality, then we tend to get a lot of disappointment, or we feel like we're a failure. And then that's just not the case, because I always say, like, you can't blame yourself for what you didn't know or the lack of resources you didn't have. So just having someone to come in with another set of eyes and some clinical skills behind lactation and oral motor function can help you just tweak a couple things. And then usually you're right on the right path.
Yeah. I can see that in the hospital. They have somebody come in and try to show you how to like do everything, but for me, I was so like tired and coming off of like the surgery and like all the medications I was taking. I just didn't remember. I struggled remembering everything. So I think having that like one-on-one support at home would have
Mhm.
been amazing. And I hope that other moms hear this that are going through this experience and can work with you. Do you work with anybody outside of St. Louis? Like, do you do virtual calls as well?
Yeah. So I do virtual calls or like some consultations, like online and things like that. So if there are, I'll help that mom find the resources in their area.
Okay.
Because I do think it's super important. Like I said, we have to get hands on. We have to be able to see and feel. And there's such a connection in person that often can't be replicated virtually. So even if I can get mom on the right track and help her find the resources in her area, I still feel like I've been able to support them.
Yeah, for sure. So do you typically just do like a one-time visit? Do you have returning visits? What does that structure look like?
Yeah. So most likely, or more often than not, it is a reoccurring visit, at least a couple more visits after the initial eval, just to make sure that you're set up for success. And that's why I like to offer the unlimited text and call support, because sometimes I don't need to actually make a home visit, but we can just kind of problem solve over the phone or via text to kind of get you back on the right track or kind of navigate whatever may have come up at that moment that I wasn't able to come over or after the eval. But more likely than not, it's usually a couple visits kind of
For
sessions.
How closely connected do you feel like feeding struggles are with like a mother's mental health?
Just reflecting from my own motherhood and my own journey, I had a lot of postpartum anxiety and depression. And after kind of deep diving into the research and just kind of learning more clinically, there is a real strong correlation between feeding difficulties and mother's maternal health as well, our mental health. But because once again, it is in our nature to provide for our young and to nurture them. And we all have this vision and this image of, what is postpartum going to look like, and bonding with the baby. And so sometimes when those things get derailed, then it kind of reflects on how we feel about ourselves or our capabilities as a mom. They may be intrusive and they may not be true, but that's also our reality in that moment. So being able to kind of help and offer support and say, this doesn't define you as a mom. You have support, you have people that are in your corner and love you. And this is hard and we're here to help you, can kind of help turn that script a little bit.
Yes, every mom needs that in many chapters and phases. But that first, honestly, I feel like it's more than 6 months of,
Mhm.
nurturing. I know the newborn phase is short, but it feels so long when you're in it night and day, waking up all throughout the night. So I know part of your specialty is it's not just with like lactation support and breastfeeding, but you also help with like tongue ties or lip ties and oral development. Can you kind of talk through like when would a mom know that that's an issue?
Usually, we can kind of tell right away if there's something more that's anatomy based with the infant. I always say, like, we all have the frenulums, and that is part of our normal anatomy, but some infants or little ones, it might just be a little bit more tighter and it might just need a little bit more support to kind of do the overall function that we're asking it to do. So if the oral tie is impacting the function, then we usually recommend having that either be looked at by, an MD, an ENT, or a pediatric dentist. But if they have a tight frenulum and their oral anatomy, but it's still doing the skill we're asking it to do, then it may not need to be released or addressed, if that makes sense. But we
Yes.
definitely want to monitor it as, our oral development, our oral anatomy gets a little bit bigger, because we want to see how it impacts, if or if not, feeding and speech and all of those things as well.
Interesting. Okay. So, and what exactly is myofunctional therapy?
Yeah. So myofunctional therapy is therapy of the muscles of the mouth. So in traditional like speech therapy, we're really working on trying to, produce the correct sounds in our language. But myofunctional therapy is really getting down to the muscle structure and seeing how that's moving. Because, for example, if an infant or even a toddler, a young child has a tongue tie where their tongue is kind of anchored to the floor of their mouth, well, we're asking them to make sounds where they need to elevate their tongue. Well, we're never going to be able to achieve that because the anatomy has changed or different from the skill we're asking them to do. So that myofunctional therapy can help retrain how the muscles are moving and how the oral kind of system works as one. Yeah, feeding, swallowing, speech.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's like it all ties together, but it's obviously like separate things. So you have the feeding and then you have the speech, and that's related to the muscles. There's so many factors that are part of this.
Why I think speech pathologists add a priceless value to lactation, because with the lactation certification, our understanding, we're really looking at the science of lactation. But if we don't have an underlying understanding of how the oral motor system works, just telling mom that she needs to produce more milk doesn't necessarily correlate to better feeding outcomes. We really have to have a good understanding of how the oral motor system works and how the whole body works together within that. realm.
Yes. Yes. And so one of the reasons why I was really excited to have you on here, obviously, like you're the expert. I am the opposite of that. Like when I had a kid, I was like, my mind was blown at the fact that like we have to teach them how to talk. Like I know that sounds crazy, but I'm like, I just thought that they just pick up things. But no, like it's so much work to teach a toddler how to speak. So would you want to talk about that for a few minutes?
Yeah. So really why I just love having nurturing babbles is because I feel like the nurturing side is feeding. We all want to nurture our infant. But the babbling portion of the name is in practice those oral motor skills, we start to vocalize as babies. We have the cooing, we have the babbling, and then we start to kind of learn those syllable structures. And that becomes the language that is our, in our environment that we need. And so even just feeding your little one and talking to them and then watching your mouth and your eye contact, and they start to pick up on those vocalizations and those sounds, and then they start to mimic that. All of those skills are built from day one. They may not be coming out telling you and having full sentences, but it helps. Like I said, the foundational skills is definitely from day one and even within feeding.
Wow. That's so mind blowing. Do you still do any language like pathology, like, or do you do any language support with parents that are teaching it?
Yeah. So as far as primarily my focus is on feeding and swallowing and like oral motor. But if parents do have questions about language development, that is also within our scope to help guide them. So sometimes it's all intertwined. Little one may not be making those correct sounds, but how can we kind of encourage them so they can get their needs and their wants met? And that's ultimately developing language as well.
So, one of the biggest challenges for me as a new mom was starting solids. Like, I was scared of everything that my baby ate, right? So, when do you feel like a baby's ready to start solids?
So really, as far as like a numeral number, it's really hard to detect because really, like I said, going back a little bit earlier in our discussion is we want to look at the baby's whole body and what they're doing. The CDC and all of those things give us guidelines on ideally when, infants or little ones should start solids, but we really want to make sure that they have good foundational skills because if they're having trouble managing the liquid of the breast milk or formula, what's that going to look like when we introduce something a little bit more chunky and solid and denser? So we want to make sure that they, ideally we want them to be able to have that head control and have a little bit of that core strength. And then we kind of help coach parents and guide them on how can we present the solids so it's not one overwhelming to you or baby or coughing and choking too. That's a normal part of the feeding process, but I know it's very scary as a mom that those things kind of happen and they learn as they go kind of.
Yeah.
Feeding.
So one of the things that I think is funny is like I have some of my friends I've watched their babies like they're around my daughter's age and they'll be giving their babies like steaks to like gnaw on and stuff. And I'm like, that like freaks me out. And I'm not criticizing them, but my daughter just isn't in that place. What are your opinions?
Food and nutrition, it provides more than just stability for our body. It provides culture and routine and just tradition. So really what I say to a family that's more maybe wants to introduce more solids in their natural state, like the steak and baby led weaning versus the purees, I say offer it all because in the normal environment or out in the world, we're not just eating solids. We're having smoothies and yogurt and applesauce, and those are naturally pureed. So if families are more resistant to do like the baby food or the baby jars, can you, puree things that are like whole foods? Or like I said, we have to be able to have those skills to be able to have all of those textures, whether it's pureed broccoli or like a steak. Like I said, you should be able to tolerate it in your mouth. A lot of times with the baby led weaning, if we skip the purees, sometimes infants are a little resistant to having purees, even if it is a smoothie or kind of an accepted food. So just making sure that they have the exposure to all of it is ideal.
Yes, absolutely. And what would you say, like, this is such a stressful time for moms. What would you say to like help someone that's maybe frustrated, like the feeding's not going according to plan, or maybe not how they turned out? Like you can feel like you've failed as a mom. What would you say to that mother?
Yeah, like if we're talking more related to like breastfeeding, things like that, I would say definitely reach out and have support even throughout the whole feeding journey. If you're feeling unsure, I would definitely reach out and just have another set of eyes and hands to kind of help bounce ideas off of you. It's not our goal to change your family dynamic or how you want to feed your infant. We just want to support you. So you have someone to lean in on,
Yeah.
especially with all the amount of information from social media and Google. Like sometimes it's our job to decipher what is evidence based versus what is just trendy. And so knowing someone that really understands the clinical, evidence and science behind the skill or the goal you guys are trying to achieve is definitely ideal versus just looking on TikTok or Instagram to kind of find what you agree with or what
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
by.
Do you feel like there's a ton of just like misinformation on this subject out there that people fall into?
Yeah, I feel like there's such a underlying tone that seems like you've got to post and post and post and get all these reels and get all these followers and likes, but really is that factual information? And normally people are having a hard time deciphering, like, is this true? And like, can I trust what I find online? So, and that can just, if we already have some postpartum anxiety or stress, that can make it even more challenging for a mom to feel supported.
100%. I know some moms take like a social media break after they have a baby because there's so much noise and it's overstimulating, right?
Mhm.
Having all that coming at you at once. I liked some of the mind break of having social media like while I had a baby, but I think I definitely took time away because there's so many things out there that make you feel like you're not on track, or that you're not doing a good job. And it's just like everybody's different and you just can't trust what you're seeing. Like,
Well, and everybody's different, and those people are only sharing their experience. But like, what is your underlying medical history? What's baby's underlying medical history? What's our culture? What's the goal behind that? And that can differ from person to person.
yes. So I'm going to go through, there's like 6 or 7 questions and you can just say like myth or fact.
Okay, that's good.
So, fire, myth, or fact? You have to drink gallons of water to make milk.
I would say there's some factual information. We want to stay hydrated when we're nursing or breastfeeding, but it doesn't need to be gallons.
Okay, oatmeal always increases milk supply.
Myth.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, like I said, we need dense nutrition to fuel our body, but there is a false reality that if you eat this certain food, it's going to correlate to more milk. It's usually a combination of things.
Okay, you're taking away my oatmeal cream pies. I'll still eat them. Formula means you failed. Myth.
That is a big myth. No, you did not fail. You are raising a baby to the best of your ability and you're providing nutrition, love, and comfort. That is the biggest myth ever.
Okay, myth or fact? Breastfeeding should never hurt.
That is a fact. Really, breastfeeding in the beginning can be a little bit uncomfortable and maybe a new sensation that's never been felt before. But if we're having throughout the feed or there's trauma to the breast or nipple, there's definitely something that needs to be corrected or changed.
Okay. Bigger babies are healthier babies.
That is a myth.
I was like, wait, not. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's a myth.
Yep.
Every baby should feed on the exact same schedule.
Myth.
So what would you say, what is the schedule for babies? Like,
So we want, like I said, we look at a lot of factors. One, we have to look at just the baby's overall whole body. What does the genetics look like? Also, you're asking about how many times we feed them. Yeah, we want to make sure they're gaining weight, they're having good output, and all those the holistic
yes.
from them.
Do you help mothers establish a feeding schedule?
Yeah, I would say a loose schedule. We're trying to get away from a hard every 3 hours and to more of a flexible feeding on demand schedule. Because just like you or I, there's some days we may not eat until dinner. That doesn't mean that's a normal, schedule every day. So yeah, it fluctuates just like you or I would snack or graze or have different feeding times.
Okay. Okay. So next question, pacifiers always ruin breastfeeding.
That is a myth. Both of my babies were pacifier babies. I think you just have to be mindful on how you present the pacifier and what is the goal of the pacifier. If the goal of the pacifier is to pacify the baby to like learn to sleep through the night, or is the pacifier in the mouth all day and the baby's talking around the pacifier, well, that's going to yield a different situation down the road when we're learning language and development.
Last question. If you don't pump much, you'll have a low supply.
That is a myth. So no matter how you express milk, either nursing or pumping, it needs to be efficient. So if baby's not efficient at breast, then the milk supply will tank. If mom's not using her pump parts correct, the milk supply will tank. So no matter how we're expressing milk, as long as it's efficiently demanding of the milk to be produced and, exit, then the milk supply should be strong or stable. Now, I will caveat that and say sometimes there's some underlying metabolical issues that mom may have. But like, again, that's one of those things that just because you pump more may not yield more if you have some underlying medical diagnoses too.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Perfect. Well, that was really fun. That was all the questions. So I do want to ask you about nipples, like for bottles. Do
Yeah.
you have any recommendations or preferences or like how you instruct the mothers or your clients that you work with?
Primarily when we're looking at bottle feeding or providing support bottle feeding, we want to present it in a way that is going to optimize development orally. So whether that's we're transitioning from breast to bottle or we're primarily bottle fed, we present it in a way that is going to help development down the road. So our preferred bottles are one that mimic the skills we want them to learn. So if, for example, a mom wants to be able to breastfeed and bottle feed, then we would present the bottle in a way that would mimic what they would do at breast so that they can transition easier. It's not that there's nipple confusion. It's more that the baby learns different skills over time and they might have a preference to bottle because it might be easier than
Yeah.
breast. So
Yeah.
yeah, just being delicate in how we present that.
Yeah. I wish that you had been here when I had my first daughter. So I'm so glad that I met you because I will be talking to you when I have my next kid because like I do regret not having someone like you to support me, but I didn't know. I didn't even know this existed.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that we've connected. Can you share a little bit about your own motherhood experience with feeding your babies?
Yeah. So my first son was born during COVID and had a very hard time latching. It came through that he did end up having an anterior tongue tie. So the tongue was tied down to the floor of the mouth in the front. And so I reflected that as an inability, not a good mom, or I can't even feed my kid. I don't even know what's going on. And so not having the support, like I said, that really, tapped into my internal dialogue of how I see myself and as a mom. But as I learned more about lactation and, feeding clinically with my second son, I was able to breastfeed him exclusively for 18 months. And so having both of those dynamics kind of helps me to be able to connect with moms that I meet because I've been through that journey. I've been an exclusive pumper. I've offered formula. I've been an exclusive nurser. I've been a working mom where I've had to leave baby at 12 weeks and they have to take a bottle. So my goal is just to be able to connect personally and just be able to, it's therapeutic to help moms because I didn't have the support that I needed. And what better way to heal my inner self than to offer support to other moms in their most vulnerable time?
I love that because there's nothing like an experience, right? And you've had both, which is unique. So I think it's great that you can help others and that you do. I think it's so special. So you have a 4-year-old, and then how old is your second?
He is 6 and I'm sorry, he's about to be 4 in October, but yeah, 3 and 6.
I mean, during COVID, yeah, I just can't believe it's been that long. It's wild how COVID changed all of us. And
Mhm.
there's literally companies and businesses that have started because of COVID. We're in that era, whether it was like a lack of support or just a change of perspective. Like I've met several moms that were in the medical field that decided to retire and do their own thing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I can't even remember that we lived it's hard to think we lived through that.
I
So
know. It's like we forgot how traumatizing it was because it's over. But
it's pushed down in our inner self.
yeah, seriously. We're like, can we just forget about that and move on? Okay. So obviously you have just amazing services that you offer moms. I'm looking through the website, and just so our listeners know, it's nurturingbabbles.com, and you help St. Louis moms in person. You can do some virtual calls. You offer prenatal and postpartum lactation consulting. And then there's a package that people can purchase if interested. And then you have express milk support and return to work support. I love that because you're helping moms that are going back to work, which is already really hard. And so helping them with the breastfeeding challenges that come up because they're not breastfeeding all day, right?
Mhm.
'Cause- And then you also have some additional feeding assessment services. I want to make sure listeners know it's nurturingbabbles.com. And then for listeners, I know that there's a lot of things you wish you had as a mom, like with feeding support, but is there any advice that you would want to give to new moms?
So if I could just lend any word of advice just from experience and as a clinician, I would just say reach out for support. It may seem scary or you feel that like I don't want to ask for help. I should be able to figure this out. None of us were meant to do this on our own. And even the smallest question, it still can make a world of difference just to have that person to connect with. That's a real person. That's not just, a TikToker in California or someone virtual. But yeah, just reach out if you have any questions or concerns, and we'll definitely help guide you as best of our ability. And I always say, like, if I don't know the answer, like, I reach out to my colleagues or we collaborate. So there's always going to be someone that can help figure something out.
I'm super excited for people to learn more about you and what you're doing. I also wanted to share before we wrap up that you have a feeding support group that meets in Troy,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you meet every Wednesday from 11 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Is that do they have to pay, like, purchase a ticket to show up? How does that work?
So, with our partners from Fully Aligned Chiropractic Care in Troy, uh, Dr. Levi specializes in infant care. So, we decided to collaborate and offer a place for moms to come receive feeding support, breastfeeding, bottle feeding, formula, solids, any feeding related questions in Troy every Wednesday from 11 to 1. And then if you feel like you need more one-on-one support, or it might be a more challenging feeding situation, I do have an office there as well. So we can kind of step aside and have a little bit more of an intimate one-on-one session to kind of address your feeding concerns. Or folks can make appointments where if they want to meet me, if say they live out a little bit further west or a little bit more in a rural area, that may be a central location where we can meet in office as well to get that support. Because we were finding that folks from Troy and onward were driving upward of an hour to 30 minutes to get feeding support. I mean, you know how that is with a new infant crying and screaming, and that may not even be a feeding time that your scheduled appointment is at. So I was finding a lot of folks would go to the feeding clinic and it wouldn't even be a feeding time and baby would not do anything. And they would come with the same information that they could have gotten over the phone, feeling defeated and,
Yeah.
disappointed, and then having to, travel back an hour and a half to get just to do it all over again at the next opportunities. It's been great out in that area. And like I said, it's close to home for me. And so being able to provide support in the community is huge.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad to hear what you're doing and to meet you. And thank you, mamas, for joining. Make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 10 a.m. for a new episode on the Mamas Who Brunch podcast. I'm so glad that you're here, and please stay with us for stories from other mothers helping moms in St. Louis and beyond. So thank you so much for coming.